silent prayer. It's an honor and privilege for us to welcome Mr. Alistair De Silva, Director, Absolute Motion Private Limited, on behalf of the organizing committee for the second day of online FTP on robotics, which is funded by Atal Academy. Alistair De Silva is an entrepreneur and an experienced trainer in industrial automation and robotics industry. Since inception of his career, he has worked with top brands in motion control engineering and have been involved in core motion engineering development projects. He has trained in domains of PLC programming, motion controller programming, servo drive commissioning and programming, HMI design, courses programming in brands such as Schneider Electric, Mitsubishi, Delta Electronics, Siemens, Panasonic, and so on. He worked with UK-based MNC Trio Motion Technology in the expansion into Indian market and was the first fresher employee and one of the first few application engineers employed by Trio in India. He was in charge of sales and application support for Schneider Electric distributor Satyam Enterprises for Mumbai region. He is currently the director of Absolute Motion Private Limited, where he is leading the team of Prayas education program, which provides the relevant training in industrial automation, IoT, and basic robotics. Now, I welcome all the participants for this session. All are requested to turn off your video and audio. And if you have any doubt, you can post your questions in chat box. Our each session will be followed by 10-minute discussion. Enjoy your learning. Thank you all. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am. So a big thank you to Vidya Academy for having me, especially the electrical department for hosting this. Great. So since I have a lot to cover, I think, dive straight into it. I think I've already been introduced. My name is Alistair De Silva, and I am from Absolute Motion Private Limited. And today's topic, I will be giving you a sort of, a peek at the industrial automation side, where we actually are integrating robotics into current FMCG and pharmaceutical machinery. Okay. So I'll be covering PLC basics, motion engineering, servo drives, and servo motors. Okay. Right. So in the session one, I've planned actually to cover the PLC basics. Now, although PLC basics is a little bit out of the scope of robotics as a whole, I think because I will be programming a servo drive servo motor, it is required to at least cover the basics of PLCs, right? So we'll be covering the PLC basics first. We'll also after that go for servo basics, okay? And we'll understand the importance of servo drives, servo motors usage in the industry. In session 2, we will be having a hands-on programming session, right? So we'll be actually programming a servo from the PLC. I'll be using a live kit as a demonstration. And also a very important factor is the selection of servo motors and drives, which I feel is something which is, a big problem which is faced by a lot of people, especially from mechanical background. Okay, so we will be covering that as well. Okay, so just a brief overview about the industrial automation controls market as well as the robotics market. Okay, so the industrial automation market share right now, as of today, is valued at around $168 billion, and India especially is playing a very key role in the manufacturing industry. Okay, now, we are not only in the manufacturing industry, we are also in many industries like your steel industry, pharmaceutical, special purpose machines. But when we talk about exports of machines to countries like Middle East, Africa, even some European countries, we have seen India OEMs increase that drastically. Okay, we also have the adoption of industry 4.0, right? So in the last 2 to 3 years we have actually had a large amount of newer product companies adopting industry 4.0, right? So this will be all about improving the standard of industrial coding, industrial IoT, robotics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, motion engineering, and all these sort of things, right? Today, I think two major components of Industry 4.0 we are going to be focusing on, and one is robotics and the other is motion engineering, right? The global robotics market is estimated to be almost 62 billion, right? And manufacturing of robots and higher end, I would say, motion machines has increased exponentially in India. So, speaking from personal experience, so my company not only is in training, our core business is industrial automation and robotics. So we actually integrate for clients such as Coca-Cola, Cipla, HUL, Times of India, many clients. Okay, and we especially work with machine manufacturers, which you would call, the technical term is OEMs. Okay, so I would say 5 years back when I was in the industry, we would not see OEMs attempt to manufacture robots or palletizer machines or pick and place robots. And also we would not see OEMs try to design higher end motion machines, right? Which, I'm talking about packaging machines that are able to produce, like very high speed, high precision products, right? That we did not see much in India, and that is because India is a very price sensitive market, and the cost of this kind of automation was very expensive. Okay, now in the last 5 years, the price of motion integration, motion controllers, servo drives, and servo motors has drastically reduced, which has increased the accessibility of this kind of stuff to Indian manufacturers, right? So this is why we are seeing a large amount of increase in manufacturing of robots, even in MSMEs. Okay, so I think everyone knows that there is a very large amount of MSMEs working in India, and we see there is a huge increase in manufacturing of robots by these MSMEs. Okay, and definitely with this increase of manufacturing of robots and also high precision, high speed machinery which requires motion engineering, you will also see a demand of skilled and industry ready engineers, right? Okay, so the question is that when we talk about robotics, and I am involved in the integration of robots in current machines, especially pharmaceutical and pick and place applications. And for those who wonder why we should actually have a background in PLC, motion controllers, and servo drives and servo motors, this is just a small explainer of that, right? So you have to understand that when we talk about industrial robotics, we are actually talking about integrating those robots with current machinery, right? That is a very rare case where a robot will be working without integration with a machine, right? So be it a SCARA robot or a Delta robot or an articulated arm, you will have to, at the end of the day, pass signals and accept signals from existing control systems, right? Currently, and I would say for the last 20 years, the heart of every automation machine, in every industrial automation machine, is its programmable logic controller, which is we call as PLC, or the, I would say, the newer version of it, which we call as motion controllers. Okay, so we will be talking about that today. Now, most of the integration of robotics which happen in the industry today, and most of the clients which I work with, they are integrating robots which within already existing machines, right? So you have two types of manufacturers. You have one type of manufacturer which will actually be integrating the robot in a new machine, right? And there is a second type of manufacturer which already has the machinery and would like to integrate robotics into it to maybe increase efficiency or perform some other tasks, right? So we have to realize that we are going to be integrating robots in already existing systems, right? So this is why we need to actually have a basic understanding of PLC control systems to integrate robotics, because at the end of the day, the job of the automation engineer will be to actually, it encompasses all of this. You will have to also integrate with the current system as well as program the robot as well. The third point, which a lot of people will not generally be exposed to in the beginning, is the language part of it, right? So PLCs have evolved from using, your simple ladder to also having object-oriented programming. They also use Python. Most motion controllers use C, C++ basic as their main programming language. So the languages used in PLCs, motion controllers, and robotic controllers are very, very similar. Okay, so it is actually very beneficial to learn the language of, start with a simpler product like a PLC or a motion controller, and then go on to robotic controllers, because the language will be, it will be an easier transition to reach that language efficiency. Uh, Talking more about languages now, this is in my slide as well, but I will anyway mention it here. We have a standard called as IEC 61131-3. Okay, and this is actually a standard followed by every single top industrial automation company in the world. This includes companies that manufacture robots like your KUKA, ABB, all these different types, right? So this standard IEC 61131-3 is actually a standard which defines the languages which can be used in control environments, and also how we can design certain standard function blocks so that everyone is on the same page, right? So if you actually look at the programming environments of different industrial automation companies like Siemens, Mitsubishi, Schneider Electric, ABB, Rockwell, you will all see them using the IEC standard. Okay, so it is actually very, very important that you start from that base of learning that language, right? And when we talk about motion controllers, I will be talking more about motion controllers later. And motion controllers are actually used now extensively in robotics. So a lot of people actually call those controllers as robotic controllers, but they are actually motion controllers itself. Okay. So I'm going to be starting with the PLC basics. As I said, this is just so that we have an overview of the actual, what a PLC is, and I'm going to try to complete it as quickly as possible, because I would like to spend more time on the servo part. Okay, so I'm just going to explain the stuff which is relevant to, I would say, the programming part, which is going to come later. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so we'll start with basically what a PLC actually means. Okay, and I want everyone to understand how the evolution has come from PLCs to motion controllers to robots, right? How it has actually evolved, right? So when we talk about a PLC, PLC actually stands for, I think most people know this, a programmable logic controller. And I would like to break this into three parts, right? Just to explain this further. So the first part is the word programmable, which we use, right? And that word programmable is also means that not only it can be programmed, but it also can be reprogrammed, right? So this was actually the reason why PLCs leaped forward from other flash-based devices, right? Uh, when we talk about logic, now I have already spoken about the IEC 61131. These are the explanation of the different languages which we use in current PLC, motion controllers, and robotic functions, right? So we have structured text, we have ladder diagram, we have function block diagram, we have instruction list, and we have something called as sequential function chart. Okay, so these are the five languages which you will see very commonly used even every single automation manufacturer. Okay, so you look at Schneider Electric, Rockwell, Siemens, Mitsubishi, all Omron, all these people will be using this standard. Okay, and we also will have a controller which is going to consist of some hardware. Okay, so I actually have a servo drive, servo motor, and a PLC with me right now in front of me. I brought a live kit for demonstration, so we'll have a look at that real. The controller also is going to consist of some hardware which we'll be discussing now. Okay, right. So the need of PLCs actually came from something which happened in the industry. So this you can see pictures of very old control panels which used to exist before, and these control panels had something called as hardwired logic, right? So this was simply at the base of every logic. I think everyone knows it is ones and zeros, right? We are actually just programming anything in ones and zeros. And the second, I would say, basic of manipulating those ones and zeros, we use and or nor gates and our gate logic, basically, right? So older control panels used to use this hardwired logic. Okay, so this used to consist of electrical connections and relays. Okay, so there was no such thing as a control system back then, and we everything used to be executed in something we call as binary logic. Okay, uh, besides looking horrible, okay, there are three main disadvantages of these panels. The first problem was that the time required to build these panels was very lengthy. Second was that troubleshooting was very difficult or sometimes impossible. Okay, so I always used to ask my students that if I give you this kind of panel and I cut one wire inside and I tell you that for your final year project you have to find out what is the issue, I don't think anyone would want to take up that project. Okay, because it is almost impossible to actually diagnose when you have this kind of organization, right? And unfortunately, this, even with neat wiring, this cannot be avoided because of the very fact that it is hardwired logic, right? And the last and most important thing which we have in the industry today is that today's industry is all about production, right? It is production happening 24/7, 365. And if there is any breakdown of a machine due to any electrical fault, time required to actually bring it back to production is very lengthy. Okay, so this is just to for you all to understand why we moved to PLCs, right? Yes, so I am going to just describe the hardware very quickly of a PLC and which PLCs can actually be used for motion control and robotics, right? So this is a typical, this is a typical PLC which you will see in the industry. This is of Delta Electronics. It is a Taiwanese company. Okay, so I actually have a live kit in front of me. So I will just move this little bit further so that you can see. So yes. So I believe it is just frozen. I will just refresh it. Not a problem. I will get this running, this live feed, and we'll just check. So the inputs, a PLC generally looks like this. Okay, most PLCs, and in every control system like a PLC, you will have some discrete inputs, outputs. We call them as IOs. We call them as discrete digital signals, and we will have some analog signals, right? So in this particular PLC, we actually have our input signals being being symbolized by the symbol X. Okay, so this symbol X is actually used very commonly in the industry, and it is used to symbolize a discrete analog system. Okay, so just a second. Yeah. So we generally start the labeling of discrete input signals from 0. So we start with x0, x1, x2, and they are generally grouped in octal format. Okay, this is why you will generally see controllers having x0, x1. After x7, there will be no x8 and x9. It will go straight to x10 because we are grouping from then x10 to x17. Right, so in these controllers we group it in octal format for convenience of programming. And if you look down over here, you will also see there are some symbols called as Y. Now I think most of you might have figured it out that these are the outputs which are actually the digital outputs which we will be giving, right? So the question is that when we talk about robotics, okay, so I'll just try to get the feed up again so that I can show this. Yes, it seems to be working now. Yes, it's perfect now. Sorry for that small glitch. So I actually have a live feed of a kit which I have actually brought here, right? So I would like to actually show real industrial equipment rather than just talking about it in theory. So on the left side over here, actually we have a PLC which I've been talking about, right? And these PLCs actually wired like this. If we go a little bit further, we will see what I was talking about is your inputs uh, x0, x1, x2. So these are actually digital inputs which are going to be taken from your motion system, right? Now, when we come to the outputs are actually the most important, is because when we are running robots, sometimes we are running them in position based, or we call them as open loop position control. Okay. So in open loop position control, we are going to be using a pair of outputs to actually deliver some pulses through either PWM or PTO. Okay, so in the industry, we don't use PWM. We use something called as PTO, pulse train output. I will be showing everyone a demonstration of how we can actually output pulses to control a servo. Okay, so on the right side, actually, we have the servo drive and the servo motor. Okay, so we'll be looking at that a little later. So this is a typical PLC. Some tips basically when you are actually selecting a PLC for motion control or for servo control. So I am aware that a lot of colleges actually have PLCs with them, right? And unfortunately, they make the mistake of thinking that these PLCs will be able to run modern servo drive servo motors. It is a possibility they can be run, but how do you actually know whether it is possible to run or not? Okay, so the main classification of PLCs is we basically broadly classify them into two types. We call them, one type as relay type PLCs and one as transistor type. Okay. Transistor type PLCs are relatively newer PLCs, which actually can, because of the transistor switching, they can accept inputs, which is your X0, X1, X2, and they can output pulses from your Y0, Y1 at very high speeds. Okay, and this is actually what we require when we are controlling servo drive servo motors and robots. Okay. So a general typical base level PLC will have an input frequency of around 100 kilohertz, which means that it can take 100,000 input pulses per second. Okay, so I am talking about a input coming to your PLC or your motion controller. It can take an input frequency of 100,000 on and off pulses per second. Okay, now a lot of you might be thinking that is completely overkill, right? Because most people are thinking of sensors and buttons, right, when we are thinking about inputs. But we can also interface devices such as encoders. Okay, so we will be talking about encoders later. For those who know what encoders are, these transistor type PLCs are the ones who are able to take these encoder pulses, right? Because we will require that amount of frequency, right? So those who do not know what an encoder is, I'll just give a quick definition. An encoder is a device, electromechanical device, which will, it has a rotating shaft, which is generally coupled to a mechanical assembly, and we are able to get the rotational angle, or the positional angle by reading the pulses. So every time that encoder rotates, it is going to give us some particular pulses in our controller. And we can gather two data from these pulses. One is the amount of pulses, therefore we know the position, or whatever our mechanical assembly. So assume we have a conveyor, right? And we have a conveyor which is just connected to an AC motor and it is just rotating. We do not know the speed of that conveyor, we do not know the position of that particular conveyor at any point. So if we actually couple an encoder to this conveyor, then we are able to actually figure out how much distance it has covered. Okay, so we'll be obviously converting the pulses to millimeter, right, by using a circumference formula. Uh, but this is the use of an encoder. So when we are selecting PLCs for motion control robotics, you will generally want to have PLCs that are transistor based. Okay, that is extremely important. You cannot have relay based PLCs. So transistor based PLCs, so that you can have encoder feedback. Okay, so some robotic systems do have closed loop control, so you will be outputting pulses and getting closed loop feedback here. And you will also be outputting pulses at a very high frequency, right? So when we are going to be controlling the servo in the second session, okay, I'll be programming the servo drive servo motor. We will be using this PLC output pulses, right? And these output pulses are going to be capped again at 100,000 pulses per second. Okay, so the higher end PLC you have, the higher frequency your servo is going to be able to run. Okay. So yes, so when we talk about power supply of PLCs, PLCs work on potential difference concepts. So you will general modern PLCs actually are powered on with 24 volts DC. Okay, and some PLCs, older PLCs, like I said, many colleges might have PLCs currently in their, in their labs. They will probably have those PLCs having a line voltage, AC voltage of 120 to 240 volts AC, right? And those PLCs actually are converting that voltage internally to 24 volts. Okay, so at the end of the day, all your sensors, devices, servo drives, servo motors, robots, PLCs, motion controllers, they are all working on the common industrial standard of 24 volt DC. Okay. Yeah, so we are going to be looking at the PLC programming a little bit, and we are going to look at the inputs and the outputs and how they are actually going to be interfacing in the programming software. There is one important thing that we find very important when selecting a PLC, especially for robotics, is your scan time of the PLC. Okay. Uh, this is we are talking about the scan time of the motion controller or scan time of the PLC. Okay. So PLCs and motion controllers work on something called as scan time. So when we write a program for the PLC or the motion controller, we are going to have a particular time by which the PLC can scan the inputs and scan your program, and then accordingly fire your outputs. Okay. This was not so important in the process industry beforehand, right? So before obviously your motion engineering and your robotics, we generally used PLCs for the process industry. And in process industry, we didn't really have very high speed switching. We didn't have very high speed applications, which is why we were able to get away with having lower scan times, right? But nowadays we need to have scan times which can be even in microseconds, like 125 microseconds, 100 microseconds, something like that, is because we actually need to take all these signals and read them in a very high frequency, because in on field, when we are running machines in high speed or robots in high speed, we are going to be getting these signals at a very high frequency. So we therefore need to have a very high scan time. Okay. So this is just an overview of the hardware aspect of a PLC. I am actually going to take a small programming demonstration as well. Okay, so I'll just move this a little bit behind. And I'm going to take a small programming demonstration as well, just to give an idea of how we can actually control a program in a PLC, right? So we are not going to go very in depth of that. So I'll just give an example of what a typical PLC's IDE looks like, right? So when you talk about the development environment of a PLC, this PLC which I have in front of me actually is this is a very basic PLC, which you will find in a lot of FMCG and pharmaceutical industries. Okay, and the programming environment for this kind of PLC is something which looks like this. Okay, so I'm going to delete this, and I'll just go into a very short description of some programming elements, because when I'm programming the servo drive, I don't want everyone to not understand what I'm doing. So just a very basic idea of what PLC programming elements, when we are talking about ladder. PLC generally, we have something called as a contact element, right? And as I said, we have some physical inputs, right, connected via these wires, right? And as you can see, I have some switches down over here, right? So these switches actually are going to be controlling you are going to be getting 24-volt DC signal to my PLC, right? And in order for me to read this switch, right, I'm going to be turning on the switch. I need to read it in my PLC. To read that in a language format, we actually need to use something called as a contact element, right? So contact element looks something like this. It is a very universal thing. Every brand will have the same symbol, and it is this is because it is a IEC standard language, right? So a contact can be used to read inputs or status of outputs or bits, right? So we'll be just looking at that. I'll show that to you in the IDE. And we also have something called as a coil. So we have talked about inputs, but how do we actually turn on outputs, right? When we have lamps or something like that. So in order to turn on an output, we use something called as a coil. So a coil is actually, you could call it a write only element, right? And because it is a write only element, obviously you will only be able to use contacts for your digital outputs, because that's the only elements which we can write to, right? So in simple language, if I actually need to turn on any output in my system, it can be a motor starter, it can be a start signal to a robot, it can be a servo drive start signal, anything like that. I will have to actually turn on this coil, that particular coil, right? And as I said, the symbol for outputs is Y0, Y1. It starts from Y, right? Some PLCs will have the input symbols as I and Q, so don't get confused by that, okay? In our case, it is X and Y, right? So this is your coils. Now, we manipulate these contacts and coils to actually form logic, right? So I think many people nowadays are very comfortable in developing in structured text language, right? And in structured text, it's actually a majority part of your structured text is your and, or, if, and else, right? This is your majority part of your statements. So you can think of ladder also in a very similar way. If we actually put contacts in series, okay, you will actually have an and logic. Okay, so if we have contacts in series, it is going to be an and logic, right? So the beautiful part about ladder programming and why most people start by learning ladder programming is because it is a very simple language to use, right? So you have to understand that before dedicated control engineers were there, or mechatronic engineers, the people who had to actually do the programming were the electrical or electronics department of any manufacturing firm, right? So the programming was pushed onto this department, and they had to manage somehow, right? Learn the programs and all that. So this language was actually developed specifically keeping in mind electrical engineers, right? So you can think of it very much like the flow of current or flow of voltage, right? It is going to in ladder, it is always going to flow from left to right, okay? And so if we start from here and we can flow from left to right, and the right is where we can take some action, right? So we start from this, and we flow from left to right. So we can say this: if x0 is on, then the logic will pass further from this. If x1 is also on, then the logic flow will go further, and then it will take some action, right? So we have actually created an and logic over here, okay, in this over here. And we also have parallel logic. So I think the better way to show this is to show you in the IDE itself, okay? So let's open up this Delta's IDE. So we actually have the elements. I'm going to be showing you the kit on the right side, and I'm going to be showing you the programming here. And I'm going to be just dragging one of these elements over here, and I'm going to be naming it as, I think my first switch over here is X4. Okay, so I'm going to be naming this as X4, right? So I have introduced a contact X4 over here, right? And I'm going to be introducing a output also, so that I can turn on the output using this switch. So just to be very clear, these are not related in any way, right? These are not related in any way. This input is going to my PLC. My PLC is processing this input. It is then going to decide using this program whether it is going to turn on this output or whatever it is, right? So it is not connected electrically together, right? So the inputs and outputs in a PLC are completely isolated, right? So we have defined an X4 over here. Now I am going to define an output. So I will take a coil here and I will turn on this output here. So this is the symbol for a coil, and I will just make this, I think this is my Y3 and Y4. Okay, so I'm just going to name this as Y3, right? And since this lecture is not about in-depth PLC programming, I'm not going to be explaining the whole IDE which we have in front of us, but I just wanted to give an exposure to this is how we actually program in the industry. So I'm going to be downloading this to the PLC. Okay, so this is actually going to great. So we have actually downloaded this to the PLC. We are also live with the PLC. So I have actually connected to this PLC via Ethernet to my computer. And if I just turn on this input here, it is going to actually turn on one of these LEDs, right? So I'll just turn this on and you can see that this output has turned on. So what is actually happening is that this input is actually going to my PLC, right? And this PLC is reading this input in the programming environment, right? And then it is taking a decision to then turn on this output because this switch is on, right? So I can actually turn off the switch, and because the logic flow has stopped, this Y3 also has turned off, right? So we can actually modify this program. So the beauty of PLCs obviously is that we can modify programs. So I can actually add another output over here, okay? And I can also add a series and condition, okay? So I can write an X3 here, right? And I can download this. Okay, so we have created an and condition here. Okay, so I'm explaining it in this way so that you actually understand from structured text point of view. A lot of people are comfortable with your if else end if and or statements, right? So I'm just trying to correlate that in with your ladder logic, right? So when we have a series of contacts, okay, we have a series, and electrical engineers out here, series of series and parallel is something very which comes quite naturally to your. So we have a series of contacts here, and this is actually creating a and logic. Okay, so why is it creating an and logic? Is that if x4 and x3 are on, then only these conditions will execute. So let's test that. Okay, so if this is on, nothing happens here, right? Because there is no logic flow from the left side. If only x4 is on, then again nothing is going to happen. So we need to have both of these in an and condition on for the output to turn on. Okay, again, this is just because I don't want people to be blank when I'm programming the servo later. So I'm just giving a little basic of PLC programming, right? We also have an or condition, right? So we have or and we have to have or. So if we need to have an or condition, if and was series, or will be parallel. Okay, so I'm just going to create a parallel contact here, and I'm again going to download this to the PLC. Right, so I'm downloading this, and we are just going to see a or condition, right? So in this case, as you can see, ladder makes it so simple to actually just follow the circuit, right? So we can see very clearly that if this is on, we are having another path here, right? So we can have either this on or this on or both on. So if you actually notice, this is following your OR truth table, right? Which is your 1 and 1, 0, 0 is only going to be off, right? Off and off is off. If any one of these is on, you will have the outputs on over here, right? So this was just an overview of PLC programming. I just wanted to, I know a lot of people actually are using lower end PLCs now. PLCs are becoming cheaper and cheaper now, and they are using lower end PLCs for robotic projects. So I wish to just share the basics of that. Okay. Great. So this is all about PLC programming. We'll not be going deeper into this. Obviously, PLC programming is a huge field by itself. We'll not be talking about PLCs in depth because we do not have that time. But I hope that everyone has a very basic understanding of what PLCs are, which PLCs you can use for motion control and servo projects, which I talked about, transistor-based PLCs, right? Uh, the next thing which I would like to take is actually servo. servo drives and servo motors basic. Okay, so I'm not going to be taking the programming session now. I will be doing that in the next session, which I believe is at 11:30, I believe. Uh, right now I'm just going to be talking about the basics of servo drive, servo motors, and the construction, and why we need to learn this, right? That is the most important thing, right? So if we actually look at a a robot, okay, uh, the question is I get a lot is that a lot of people do not correlate the servo drive servo motor with robotics. Okay, so I know a lot of aspiring engineers who wish to actually get into robotics. That trend of robotics has increased drastically because of industry 4.0. And the thing is that when you actually look at robotic engineers practically in the industry now, as someone who is integrating robotics in the industry, I can tell you that it is absolutely not useful to have someone who just knows about a particular type of robot. Okay, that person should also have a complete understanding of how they can integrate those robots with current control systems, right? Because ultimately that robot is going to be running in synchronization with some machine, right? So for example, a pharmaceutical pick and place, commonly used in the in the testing kit, your testing kits nowadays. I've done a lot of machines for testing COVID testing kits and all these sort of things. uh, we use SCARA pick and place robots for putting, the testing papers and all that in the particular tubes. So in that case, you are going to have a SCARA robot not working on its own. You are going to have it actually interface with a machine which is going to be running, right? Now, when we talk specifically about servo drives and servo motors, I have actually taken an X-ray of a articulated robot, right? So, if you'll notice, we can see certain components in this, right? So, we can see a cycloidal gearbox, right, at the base, and we can see some device over here, right? There's some device here, and there are actually two of those, right? And that is also attached to a gearbox, and that is nothing but your servo drive and servo motor, right? And you have one here as well, and you have one here as well, and you have here and here. So every single joint of a robot, okay, every single joint is going to be controlled by a servo drive or a servo motor, okay, and a servo motor, right? So we need to actually understand servo drives and servo motors very well in order to actually understand robotics, right? Because if we do not know how to control servo drives, servo motors, and understand them as devices, it is impossible then to program a robot, because every single joint of your robot actually has a servo drive in it, right? So there are three components, okay? Programming, commissioning, and selection. Okay, so we are not going to be talking about commissioning today. Okay, we are going to be talking about the programming and the selection of servos today, right? So programming of servos, you will require a standalone PLC. Now, can servo drive servo motors be used as a standalone device? Yes, they can be used. Okay, but in robotics, you will 99% have a uh, you will 99% have a motion controller or a PLC. Okay, so I'm going to give a very brief. I'm going to give a very brief overview of what servos are, right? Servo drive, servo motors, and I'm also going to be. So I'll just close the IDE for now. We don't require it, and I'm just going to give you all a brief of how servos came into existence and how they got used in robotics, right? So let's just look at it. Great. So your servo drive and servo motor, I'm just going to give a very brief history. Okay, I love giving history in industrial automation because it helps us understand why we started producing newer devices, right? A lot of people know, okay, this is a servo drive, this is a servo motor, but why did the servo motor, why do we use it, right? That is the question, right? What is not there in AC motors, induction motors, that we cannot get in a servo motor, right? So the basic movement motion which we can achieve in any machine, which is very commonly seen in your conveyors, is something which we call as an AC induction motor, right? Now this AC induction motor can be a single phase or a three phase motor, it completely depends. And it is simply it is going to have a connection for your line and neutral in case of single phase. In three phase, it's going to be your three phases or thing connected. And the functioning of an AC synchronous motor is very simple. It is going to have a rated RPM. It is going to have a rated torque, and that torque is going to vary as per your speed. Okay. So the problem also with induction motors is that it requires a certain amount of starting torque to actually start before we actually start moving the load, which is why you have things like motor starters, right? But for small loads, you will not require a motor starter. You can simply connect your line and neutral to a normal supply, AC supply, and turn on the switch, and your motor will start rotating. Now, obviously, there are some issues over here, right? There are some issues. The first issue is that we need to actually turn on this motor using a control system, something like a PLC or a motion controller, right? So that is the first problem, right? And the second and third issues is that when we actually give power to this AC induction motor, we are going to be rotating at rated speed, rated RPM. Okay, so whatever the rated RPM of the motor is, it is going to rotate at that RPM. Okay, so we have no control of the speed as of now. Okay, and in order to at least be able to control from the PLC, we use something called as a contactor. Okay, so a contactor, I'm not going to go very much deep into it. A contactor is a device which can be used to switch your mains, but it will have a support for a DC signal, like a 24-volt DC signal from a PLC. Okay, so this is what a contactor is, right? And because we are able to now control this contactor on and off, it is somewhat like a relay. Okay, something like a relay. Because we can turn the contactor on and off using a 24-volt DC signal, we can then control it using our Y0 from our PLC, or our output basically from our PLC, right? So we got one problem solved, right? That we can actually control the motor on and off using our control system. Now, two more problems, right? Speed and position. These are two issues which we have not yet solved. Okay, so how we are going to solve those issues? In order to control this speed, okay, there was a device called as a VFD, which was introduced. Okay, so a VFD uses the concept that if we actually change the frequency of the power delivered to the AC motor, okay, we know that our AC is 50 hertz or 60 hertz depending on the company where country where you are. But if we change this frequency which is delivered to the AC motor, we can then control the speed, okay, of that particular motor, right? So again, VFD is not going to be used, we're not going to be explained very much in depth, but I want you all to understand why we arrived at servo drive servo motors for robotics, right? So so a VFD or an inverter drive, okay, we also call it as inverter drive or a variable frequency drive. Okay, it's variable frequency drive is a kind of motor drive which is used in electromechanical drive systems, right? So we are going to be controlling the AC motor speed, and we are going to be controlling the torque, and this is done by actually varying the voltage. So your VFD is going to get your input power, which can be single phase or three phase, and it can be outputting single phase or three phase again, but with variable frequency, right? So obviously that frequency is going to be set on the VFD. Okay, so the VFD in itself is a controller. Okay, and but generally we do not use VFD standalone. We will use them with a PLC, right? So this has now solved my second issue, right? Which is basically my speed control, right? So if I have a conveyor system where I need to control the conveyor, I need to maybe run it slow sometimes, fast sometimes. I have a blower, I have pumps, or any such application which requires some level of speed control, right? Now, this has solved my control problem. It has solved my speed problem. It has still not solved one problem which I'm still facing is my position problem. Okay. So what is the position problem? The position problem is that when I have an AC motor, anyone who has run an AC motor in a lab kind of situation will know that when I actually turn on that AC motor, I have absolutely no control over the position of the shaft, right? So if I have a conveyor and I say, let's say that I know that I turn on my conveyor for 1 second and it moves 100 millimeters, let's say, okay. If I turn on the conveyor again for 1 second, it is not going to move 100 millimeters, okay. So that position of the shaft keeps changing, right? And this is the reason why we actually needed to modify these VFDs in order to, get better position control. Okay. So if anyone knows, those in the chat, do you all have any idea? There is one particular industry which is using VFDs on a large scale, okay, and not only is using VFDs on a large scale, but they also need to do it in, they need precision position control. Does anyone have any idea which industry I'm talking about? Okay, so think of an industry where you are going to be using very big AC motors, and you will not only need to control the speed of those AC motors, but you will also need to control the position of those AC motors. Okay, so just think of that industry. You can put it in the chat if you know this answer, right? There's a particular industry which is using these VFDs. Okay, so in order to actually get the position of the particular system, we will require to use something called as an encoder. Okay, and an encoder is a device I've already explained, which is going to give us a positional feedback. Okay, I have a picture of an encoder after this. It's going to give you a positional feedback, and we can actually attach this encoder to the motor. Okay, and this motor can then give the feedback back to the variable frequency drive, right? Now this kind of VFD is can be actually used in the industry. Okay, and to a certain extent we are able to get good position control. Okay, but unfortunately when we talk about robotics or high precision high speed machines, it is impossible to even use a variable frequency drive. Okay, the technology had to be changed, right? And this is when we introduced the servo drive and servo motor. Okay, so servo drives and servo motors were introduced to actually achieve this high speed high precision requirement which was given by the industry. Okay, so for my previous question, the answer was that the crane industry is using, right? So if you actually look at the crane industry, right, cranes need to pick and place very heavy objects. So the capacity of the motors are going to be very high, and in cranes unfortunately we cannot use servo drives. Okay, because servo drives are very very expensive, right? So when we are talking about cranes, we are talking about 30 HP, 50 HP, 100 HP motors, and maximum servos you will get up to 10 HP, right? So it is very impractical to try to develop a servo for a crane system. So therefore, we have to use a closed loop VFD for the crane industry. Okay. So that was the answer to that question. The crane industry is actually the one which drove this requirement for position control. Right. Now we'll go further from here. let's talk about servo drives and servo motors very quickly, and we'll try to complete this theory part. Uh, there are some, I know a lot of people are using, steppers for robotics, and they are actually calling it servo. Okay. So let's try to understand there is a very big difference between steppers and servos. Okay. Very large difference, and a general stepper motor will look something like this. This will be what a servo motor looks like, right? The main difference, how you can differentiate the two, is that a servo motor will have the encoder feedback going back to the servo drive. Okay. So if you, I will show you the motor. So if you can see, this is the servo drive. This is the motor which is connected like this, right? So I actually have the same motor connected here, right? And you can see there are actually two wires, right? There is one wire here and one wire here. We'll be understanding what these two wires are, right? And why is that different from a stepper, right? And I've just kept a disc over here, right? This is just to show you the rotational, the rotation of the servo, but the servo shaft looks like this. Okay, so this is actually being integrated with my disc over here, right? I have fitted the disc over here. So let me just shift this back, right? Okay. And so when we are going to be using servo drives and servo motors and servo steppers in robotics, okay, we need to understand first of all the difference between the two. Where to use steppers, where to use servos. Okay, these are a lot of data. I'm only going to be showing you the very important points, right? Just an overview. So when we talk about stepper versus servo, first of all, when we talk about torque density, okay, now when I talk about torque density, I'm talking about torque per watt. Okay, when we are talking about torque density. So if I have a 200-watt servo and I have a 200-watt stepper, okay, the stepper is going to have more torque for that 200 watts. Okay. Uh, but when we talk about torque and speed range, okay, torque and speed range, then definitely we will have to go with a servo, and we will understand why. Okay. uh, steppers generally steppers generally will be run in open loop, which means that there is no encoder feedback. So you can see there is actually at the back of every servo there is going to be an encoder feedback, right? And the most important thing of steppers versus servo is when we are running in high speed. Okay, so this is actually the whole selection is about speed versus torque. Okay, so if you require high torque at lower speeds up to 800 rpm, then you can go for a stepper. Anything above, I would say, 1000 rpm, you need to go for a servo. Okay, and you will get a lower torque in a servo, so you'll have to probably select a higher wattage of servo. Okay, so that is completely how you are going to be selecting this, right? So these are the main differences between stepper and servo. There is no good and bad. Okay, I just request everyone that when you are using this for a robot, okay, please understand what you are using. Do not just assume that it is a servo. Everyone loves to use the word servo these days, but you have to understand what actually is a servo. This is an industrial grade servo which I am showing you right here, and this is an industrial grade stepper. Okay, so very good. And again, I'm repeating it, the very good way to identify is by seeing where, if there is a feedback going to the drive. Okay, so this feedback wire, okay, which is behind here, okay, this feedback wire is actually going to my servo drive in front here. Okay, this is looped inside, so I'm actually getting the positional feedback of the motor as well after giving the command, right? Okay, so we'll just cover some basics about servos now that we have covered that, and we'll go to a Q&A session. So for servo drives and servo motors, we generally have different types. Okay, we sometimes classify them as AC and DC types. Okay, this is including steppers as well. We also have your brushed and brushless types, and we have your synchronous and asynchronous types. Okay, so the most common ones used in the industry right now are your AC brushless synchronous servo motors. Okay, I'm repeating it again. It's AC brushless synchronous motors, right? These are the most common ones used currently, right? When you look at steppers, you actually have two types of steppers. You have your AC steppers and you have DC steppers, and this is actually based on your application. Okay, so I know a lot of robotic applications, definitely not industrial applications, but just for demonstrating something, those that are using DC steppers. Okay, and finally we come to something, what is an encoder actually, right? So we actually have uh, we actually have two types of feedback in the industry right now. Okay, and one is your encoders and one is resolvers. Okay, encoders generally you will find in brands that are more manufacturing in Asia. Okay, so in Asian markets we will get encoders more, and in European markets we'll get the resolvers more. They are completely different technologies. uh, an encoder I'll just show you the construction. So there is generally, this is how the encoder feedback is taken. There are two discs. Okay, and there is a LED and a receiving element on this side, and based on the position of these discs, which is going to change with the position of the servo motor, we are going to get uh, some feedback, right? And very roughly we have there's a chart here which is showing me the angle. Obviously we are going to have angular accuracy of 0.01 degrees also, right? So it's not going to be just these simple angles, but just as a demonstration, right? So based on the position of these plates, and there are different slits and that sort of thing, that kind of technology, right? There are actually two types of encoders. There is one called as incremental encoder, and there is one called as absolute encoders. Okay, and this is important from a robotics point of view. For robotics, we never use incremental encoders. We use something called as absolute encoders, right? The main difference between incremental and absolute encoders is that once an incremental encoder is turned off, it loses the memory of that position. Okay, so what happens is that, supposing I have a Cartesian robot and I turn off that robot, the power goes off. When I turn it back on, I need to remember the position of the joints. Okay, I cannot I have to know the current position to get to the next position, right? When we are talking about joints. So that is why we use something called as absolute encoders. Now, absolute encoders, actually, there are various types. Okay, there are true absolute, then there are pseudo absolute and all. We will not get into that. But the essential thing about an absolute encoder is that it will remember the position of the servo motor after we have moved it. Okay, so supposing I move my robot to, let's say, XYZ coordinate, and I turn off the power, it will remember that position. Okay, and one more, true absolute encoders, even if the power is off and we move the robot mechanically when the power is off, we will still be able to get the reading, okay, of the encoder position. So this is why encoders are used generally in robots. We also have resolvers. Now, resolvers also have absolute resolvers, but I would say mostly we use absolute encoders more in robotics. Okay, resolver technology is a little bit different. We have we have a coil which is kept at an angle of phi, and we then have a cos and a sine winding. Okay, and based on the rotational angular position of the servo, we will be able to get some particular reading at this end, and then there's a transformer which will convert that to a DC signal for us. Okay, so this is all about your feedback. Okay, and I'm just going to quickly show you what a servo looks like, right? So this is your servo on the right side. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Yeah, so this is the construction of your industrial servo, and this generally is kept at so there are efforts now to reduce the size of this. So this actually is now sometimes kept in the joint of the robot itself. Okay, so we are reducing the size of this and putting it in the robot itself, right? There is if we don't have to do that, this will have to be kept in a panel outside the robot, right? So any HMI, any servo will always have something called as an HMI display. We can see this display here, which will basically show us the position or the speed or whatever we program it to show, right? And we also have the power supply of the servo over here. So we have a power stage here. We have L1, L2. These are our lines. So this is a single phase servo, and I'm using these single phase just shorting with each other. So I have two stages. There's a controller supply and there's a power stage supply, right? And these two are basically supplied to the servo, right? We also have a UVW. Okay, so this is actually where we are outputting power to the motor, right? So we are getting input power here, amplifying it in the servo, and we are outputting over here, right? And if we need to interface this with a controller or a PLC, we need to use this connector. Okay, so this is called as your IO interface. This is going to be taking your master controller or your PLC signals, basically, right? And I've already explained the encoder interface, right? Now the other pins, okay, which are there, we have a ground terminal that is self-explanatory for earthing, and we also have a braking resistor. Okay, so now this braking resistor is actually not used for servo braking. It is used when your load is going against gravity. Okay, it is going when I hope everyone knows that when you are running a motor, it is either in motoring mode or generation mode. Okay, a lot of people don't know that when a motor is going reverse against gravity, it is in generation mode then, right? So to dissipate that energy, we require to have a braking resistor.
बताओ और चालू है
Okay, so
वही एडमिशन वाला
okay, so let's go on to the modes of servo. I think that is the main thing which we need to see. When we are going to be learning about selection later. Okay, so I'll be talking about how do you select a motor. Okay, and we'll be using a software for that. Just to give you an idea, these are the different wattages which you have in servo motors, right? So you will have 100 watts, 200 watts, right up to 7.5 kilowatts, right? So this is your range, and according to the drive, you will have to select the correct motor as well, right? So you have a motor selection as well. We'll be covering this in the second session. Before we conclude this session, I would like to just explain the three main modes of servos. Okay, so especially when we talk about robotics, many people do not realize that actually we are using multiple modes of servos to control certain aspects. Okay, so the first mode which we need to learn and which most people are using currently is something called as position control mode. Okay, so position control mode is a very self-explanatory mode. We are going to be using pulses from a device. Okay, we are going to be using pulses, and this can be coming from your PLC or your robot controller or your motion controller. Okay, and this is 95% of what is being used in demonstration colleges, projects. This control mode is used, right? So we are going to be outputting some pulses either through PWM or PTO to the servo drive or servo motor, and I will be showing you how we are going to be outputting these pulses and how we calculate how many pulses to give, right? So that is in the second session again. So we have position control mode being used for applications which require precise position. Okay, this can be your pick and place palletizer robots. It can be gantry robots, things like that, right? Now position control mode is a very simple mode. We are going to be giving two main data to the command. The first is the position, and the second is going to be the speed, right? So two things we are going to describe to the servo. We are going to say move to so and so position, and we are also going to tell it how fast should I move to that particular position, right? So this is your position control mode. This is something which is used very, very commonly common in your current robotic industry. Okay, we have a control mode which is called as speed control mode. Okay, now this control mode is actually not used very commonly in robotics, but I will just explain it once, right? So in the case, in the case where you need to have a sustained speed which is not going to change with respect to load. Let's say that you have a blower, or you have a conveyor, or you have any movement which you want to just control the speed. You know that I want to run this at 200 rpm, right? And you want that speed control to be very, very precise, right? Even when the speciality of a servo drive is that when the load increases, okay, when the load is going to increase on the shaft, right, on the motor, automatically the servo is going to amp up the current and increase that torque so that it maintains the target speed. Okay, so that is what a servo drive will do, right? So speed mode is used especially for that, but we just to mention, this is not used much in robotics, right? This mode is something which we use very extensively in robots, which is called as the torque control mode. Okay, so in torque control mode, the best way I can explain this, okay, is by using something like a bottle capping application, right? Where you are going to have a robot which is going to be capping, just screwing a cap on, or winding something, or anything like that which requires feedback, right? So in general, I have a bottle of water in front of me, right? So I think most of you have seen Bisleri and Bailey bottles, which have the type of caps which you need to rotate, right? So I think everyone has used these kind of bottles, right? Now, when you actually observe these bottles, you will see that there are some threads over here, right? So there are some threads which we can see on this bottle right here, right? And in an ideal world, if we rotate this cap on the bottle, right? Generally, when we rotate it with our hand, we actually don't realize that our hand is one articulated robot only, right? So our hand is actually going to be rotating that cap, okay, and it is going to keep rotating it until we get a signal from our fingers, which is taking a torque feedback of that bottle, saying that the bottle cap is now become tight, right? That is how we know that we have tightened it, right? Then what happens is that the torque feedback is given to our brain, right, which is our motion controller, and our brain then tells our articulated hand robot, right, to stop turning that cap, right? This is exactly what happens in the industry, right? We need to somehow get the torque feedback, right? So it just so happens that servo drive servo motors also have a mode called as torque control mode, right? What happens in torque control mode is that we get the amount of force being exerted at the end effector. Okay, so if we are rotating something here, or we are pushing, or any sort of action we are doing, we are basically exerting some level of torque or force. Okay, and in order for us to to get that feedback, we will need to run that particular motor in torque control mode, right? So in torque control mode, we'll be able to read the torque which is going to come into our servo drive and then be given to our controller. Okay, that is what is going to happen, right? And that is your three main modes which we are going to be running. In general, I would say we have the position control mode and the torque control mode being used extensively in robotics. Okay, so this actually concludes the first part of the session, which was just basically a theory part. Okay, and the second part is going to be more practical, where we are actually going to be programming a servo. Okay, so we'll be keeping that for, and we'll keeping a little bit longer Q&A session then also. So I believe we have 10 minutes exactly till the end of this session. So I'll be taking some I'll be taking the any questions or queries which you all have. So anything you all have, please let me know. I'll be looking at the chat. So I'll just go through. I think there was already one question. Which DC actuator is more suitable for a four-legged mechanism-based robot? That actually is it is a very generic question, in the sense that I can give you a lot of suggestions. It actually depends a lot on the weight and the amount of Newton meter force which you will require to actually control this robot. Okay, so based on that, we will actually have to go for DC or AC based. Okay. Anything else besides the question?
If anyone else, you can ask your questions. Or else we can break for half an hour.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. So I believe 11:30 will be the next session, I believe, right?
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you all. The link for marking the attendance that is available in your chat box. You can mark your attendance. Second session will start sharp at 11:30. So all of you, please be on time. Thank you, sir. Thank you all.